In the next few videos, we will be covering pivot tables and pivot charts. So if I were to summarize a pivot table, I would say that this tool is used to filter through your data. So you can basically extract the information you want from your data quickly and efficiently. And then the pivot charts that are used to represent the filtered data. So maybe you might not understand this now perfectly fine. And by the end of this section, you will have a really good understanding of what pivot tables and pivot charts can do for you and how to use them. So first of all, what you need to do is you need to just download this workbook from the link given in the description of this video so that we can start off with the pivot table. So I'm hoping that you have already downloaded this workbook, and let's get started with pivot tables. So as you can see, we have this table here which is there in the sales spreadsheet. So just come to the sales spreadsheet. It's a really simple table to understand, even though there's a lot of data to take in. But the general overview of it is quite simple. So first of all, we have some salespeople here, and they are selling tables, chairs, cabinets, and TV stands. And we have these various figures that represents their sales. So we have things like net profit, the total revenue for each of the items being sold, etc. So like I said, it's quite a simple table to understand. But there's still a lot of data here, and I think it would be a great idea to use pivot table to extract the information that we want from this large table. But before we get started, there's a 4-point checklist that you must go through. And if you don't go through this checklist and enforce these 4 rules, basically your pivot table and eventually your pivot charts might not work that well. But the good news is the checklist is pretty simple. First of all, you need to avoid the grand totals within your source data. So within this table here, we have a lot of totals. Add up all these figures and that would have given me a grand total here, and then of course I could just use autofill to fill in the rest of this column, and that would work okay. However, if I were to put my grand totals down here, that's going to upset the balance of this table, and it's kind of difficult to explain. The flow of all of the information is going from the left to the right. And if I were to put my grand totals down here, like I said, it would mess around with the balance of the table. So you got to be careful when putting in your grand totals, because this can really throw off your pivot table. So that's one thing to be aware of. The next thing is ensuring that all of your columns have headers. As you can see here, I have this salesperson, number, area, and so on. I have headers for all of these columns. So all of these columns do need to have a heading, so make sure that you do that with your table. The third point being, make sure you do not have any blank cell within your data. And if you do have a blank cell, then you need to put in something. So if it's maybe one of these cells here, and let's say there was just no data within this, then you can just put in a 0. So just go in and do something like that. But like I said, every cell needs to have some type of data within it. And then we need to avoid merged cells. So we already know what merge and centering is. You can just select some cells like this and click on merge and center, and these cells have been merged together. So that's the fourth thing that you want to avoid. But generally speaking, you just want to have a table that is nice. The layout of it is nice and it's not really complicated. And you also got nothing missing in the table, and it just looks like this table here. This is the prime example of what your table should look like if you are going to start building a pivot table and then eventually your pivot chart. So now we can move on to creating our first pivot table. If you really wanted to, you can just zoom out a bit and select the whole table like this. However, it's not really necessary, so all you need to do is just select any cell within your table and then come to this insert tab here and then click on pivot table, and this prompt will show up. As you can see, Excel has made an assumption that it's this table that we want and selected it for us. If for any reason this is incorrect, then you can just click on this option here and you can select your table manually like this and click here to input, and it will get accepted. The next thing it is asking for is, where do you want to put your pivot table? Do you want to put it in a new worksheet or the existing worksheet? So I'll quickly just demonstrate an existing worksheet, and for that I'll select existing worksheet here. And I do have a spare spreadsheet here just to demonstrate this. Now you may think of yourself that all I need to do is just type in the name of the spreadsheet and that will work. But what you really need to do is actually select the spreadsheet itself from here, and then you need to just select the whole spreadsheet by clicking here, and now that will get accepted. But this is not what I want to do. Most of the time you'll probably find yourself using a new worksheet. So I'll just select this option here, and then once you are done with that, you can just click OK. And here we are at the beginnings of building our pivot table. If you do this and this area here is missing, and by the way, yours might look a little different to mine. And this is because the Excel has changed the layout of this from version to version. So the filter, columns, rows and value boxes might be over on the right, and this area here will be on the left. But generally speaking, it doesn't make any difference. It all does the same thing. But yeah, your layout might look a little different from mine. But if it's missing, then basically what you need to do is just click inside of this graphic here and it will show up. If it still doesn't show up, then just come to this pivot table analyze up here and make sure that this field list is checked on, and then it should show up. Okay, so now we can move on to the next tutorial where we are going to build our first pivot table.